always thought the company meeting room was a place for strategy, planning, and performance charts. I never expected it would become the battlefield where my entire life would change. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. My name is Julia Martinez. I'm not just a mother or a widow or the woman everyone underestimated. I'm the woman who was supposed to quietly disappear. But I didn't. Let me take you back to the beginning. 2 years ago, I was married to Daniel Roth, heir to Rothwell Industries. He was charming, bold, and full of promise. When we met, I was working as a senior product manager in a rising tech firm. I had my own identity, my own goals. Daniel admired that. At first, we fell fast. Within a year, I was pregnant, married, and moving into a high-rise apartment Daniel's family paid for. That's when the shift began. His mother, Margot Roth. Even before our wedding, she never saw me as an equal. She smiled with her lips, not her eyes. She called me ambitious like it was an insult. Daniel tried to defend me, but Margot had a way of making everything feel like it was for our benefit. "You don't need to work anymore, Julia," she said. "Focus on the baby. The company's in good hands." That was code for stay out of the family business. I stayed quiet for a while. Daniel convinced me that I had to earn her trust, and I tried. I attended every event, learned the history of Rothwell Industries, even suggested ideas to streamline their outdated inventory system. No one listened, especially not Margot. And then Daniel died. It was a car crash, rain-slick roads, a phone call at 1:14 a.m. I remember every second after that in blurry fragments. My knees on the floor, my baby crying in the other room, and Margot standing by his hospital bed, already taking calls and making plans like the company couldn't afford to pause for grief. 2 weeks later, she approached me with legal documents, an offer to relieve me of Daniel's company shares in exchange for a generous lump sum and a guarantee that my son Leo would be provided for through the family trust. I didn't sign. That was when the war began. First, it was subtle. Meetings I was excluded from. Staff who once smiled now avoiding eye contact. But the real weapon, my son. Margot started implying that I was unstable, too emotional to raise Leo on my own. She even suggested that he'd be better off staying with her during the week so I could recover and rest. I refused. Suddenly, I was being investigated by Child Protective Services after an anonymous report. Nothing came of it, but it sent a chilling message. She was willing to cross the line. That's when I contacted Martin Blake, Daniel's former attorney and a man I barely knew, but someone Daniel had always trusted. I needed help, not just legally, strategically, and Martin delivered. He reviewed Daniel's estate plan and found a clause buried in a trust amendment Daniel signed after Leo was born. Clause that changed everything. Apparently, Daniel never fully trusted Margot either. According to the document, Daniel had transferred his Rothwell shares into a trust for Leo, but with a provision that gave me full proxy voting rights until Leo turned 18. The shares were mine to control. But Rothwell's internal board never knew, because Margot never disclosed it. The catch: I had to prove I was capable of managing them, or the clause would be voided. Martin and I developed a plan. I rejoined Rothwell quietly under a consulting title, an opportunity Margot thought she was handing me to keep me distracted. Played the role. Took notes. I observed. What I was really doing was building allies. I met with department heads off the record. I audited outdated product lines and identified where millions were being lost. I shared these insights with Martin, who helped me prepare a strategic presentation for the upcoming shareholder meeting. The one Margot thought she'd be using to oust me. 'Cause oh yes, she had a plan too. She called the upcoming Q3 shareholder meeting an opportunity to restructure leadership, and whispered through company hallways that I'd soon be leaving the firm entirely. That I was graciously stepping down to focus on motherhood. But the morning of that meeting, I dressed not like someone preparing to leave. I dressed like someone ready to take back everything. My blouse was navy silk. My heels sharp enough to draw blood. Martin handed me a file, my trump card. I looked in the mirror and whispered to myself, "Don't blink first." The conference room was packed. Shareholders, board members, and Rothwell executives. All people who once nodded politely and dismissed my opinions. Margot stood at the head of the room like she owned it, calm and radiant in her cream-colored suit. "Before we begin," she said, her voice syrupy smooth, "I'd like to formally recognize Julia for her contributions during this transitional period. We appreciate her presence." Polite applause. Smiled back. "Now," she continued, "we'll be opening discussions on proposed leadership realignments. Some decisions may be difficult but are necessary for our long-term stability." That's when I stood. "Actually," I said, placing my folder on the table, "before we do that, I'd like to present a shareholder motion of my own." Whispers erupted around the room. Margot's smile froze. I opened the file and slid copies across the table. "These are the legal proxy voting rights granted to me by Daniel Roth through our son's trust. As of now, I hold controlling interest in Rothwell Industries. 51% of total shares." Stunned silence. Margot blinked, then laughed. "This is absurd. That clause was never executed. It was conditional." "Yes," I said, locking eyes with her. "Conditional upon my capability. And I believe the last 6 months speak for themselves." I gestured toward the slide deck on the projector. The screen flickered to life. I began my presentation, not as a widow or a mother-in-law's pawn, but as the woman who knew this company better than they ever expected. I exposed inefficiencies, introduced bold, tested strategies, named names, numbers, results. By the time I was done, no one was looking at Margot. They were looking at me. And that was just the beginning. The silence after my presentation wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. The kind of silence you get before an earthquake, when the air thickens and you know something is about to shift. The boardroom was full of stunned faces, but none more so than Margot Roth's. She didn't speak. Not at first. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tapped her pen against the table. Her smile was gone, replaced by something cold and mechanical. A predator sizing up the unexpected. Then she leaned forward and said, "I think we need a recess." The meeting was adjourned for 30 minutes. Most people left in a daze. I stayed seated. Martin, ever calm, leaned toward me and whispered, "Well done. She's off balance." "She's not out," I whispered back. "Not yet." 'Cause I knew Margot. You don't run an empire for 40 years and let it slip from your fingers without a fight. Sure enough, when we resumed, Margot came back with a new strategy. She didn't challenge the documents or the trust, she couldn't. Instead, she changed the narrative. "Of course Julia has voting rights," she said sweetly. "Daniel and I spoke about it often. It was meant to give her a voice. But a controlling voice. That's not what he would have wanted. Especially considering her situation." There was the pivot. "What situation?" one of the board members asked. Margot folded her hands. "Julia's grieving, of course. But more importantly, she's a single mother with no formal executive experience. It's not an insult, it's a concern. For the company and for her well-being. I expected this. I even had responses prepared. What I didn't expect was what came next. "Furthermore," Margot said, sliding a folder down the table, "I believe it's in the company's best interest to consider a full psychiatric review before transferring full shareholder authority. For safety. For compliance." I stared at the folder. Inside it were printed emails, calendar entries, even a photo of me outside a therapist's office, taken without my knowledge. She was trying to paint me as unstable, unfit. Hit me like a punch to the gut. Because I had seen a therapist. After Daniel died, I nearly drowned in grief. But I pulled myself out, not because I was weak, but because I had the strength to ask for help. Martin raised his voice. "This is an outrageous invasion of privacy." Margot shrugged. "It's public concern. This is a billion-dollar company, Martin. If our acting majority shareholder isn't fit to lead, The board has every right to demand an evaluation. I didn't respond. Not yet. I sat still as the room spun around me. And then I said, "Fine." The room went silent again. "I'll do your evaluation. On one condition. That the board agrees to audit every single executive bonus and family compensation transaction made over the last 10 years. Including yours, Margot." One man dropped his pen. Margot's face flushed, her jaw twitching. "This is absurd." "No," I said calmly. "It's transparency. I'm willing to put myself under the microscope, if you are." She didn't respond. 'Cause she knew what I knew. The Roth family bonuses had long been a sore spot. Quiet, unchecked withdrawals masked as operational costs. I wasn't bluffing. I was prepared. The motion passed. The evaluation would happen, but so would the audit. And now, Margot wasn't just battling me, she was being watched. The weeks that followed were tense. The company was split. Some believed I was an opportunist using my child's trust as leverage. Others admired my composure and brains. The press was already circling. Past the evaluation, of course. The psychiatrist, an independent evaluator approved by both parties, declared me mentally fit, emotionally grounded, and highly capable under pressure. But while I passed my test, Margot was failing hers. The audit revealed over $4.7 million in unapproved family-related disbursements, payments routed to shell companies, luxury travel, even tuition for a grandchild that wasn't hers. It was a gold mine of misappropriation. And she knew it. That's when she changed tactics again. She stopped trying to discredit me and went after my child. It started with a phone call from Leo's school. "Hi, Ms. Martinez. We just wanted to confirm. Has there been a change in custody? Your mother-in-law called and said she'd be picking Leo up from now on." Froze. "No," I said, my voice tight. "There's no change." Called Margot immediately. "You're crossing a line," I said. She didn't deny it. "He's my grandson. I have a right to protect him." "From what?" Snap. "From you," she said. "You've dragged him through your power trip long enough. He deserves stability." The next morning I received a notice. Margot had filed a petition for temporary emergency custody. Her claim, that I was emotionally unstable, working erratic hours, and putting Leo at risk. The court date was set for the following week. Martin was furious. "She's gone nuclear." "I knew she would," I said. "But you still weren't ready for this," he replied. He was right. This wasn't about the company anymore. This was about my son. And so, I did what I always do when Margot underestimates me. I prepared. We pulled school reports, therapist letters, pediatrician records. I logged my schedule, my childcare hours, even installed cameras inside the house. Not for safety, but for evidence. I wasn't just fighting a custody battle. I was fighting a war for credibility. And yet, something still didn't sit right. Late one night, I opened one of Daniel's old notebooks. He used to jot ideas down on paper, sometimes notes from meetings, other times random thoughts. In the margin of one page, under a scratched-out title for a company rebrand, I saw something strange. "If anything happens, check the file at Northern." What file? What was Northern? I scoured our shared storage drive. Nothing. Then it hit me. Northern wasn't a file. It was a branch. Northern Logistics. A dormant Rothwell subsidiary they hadn't touched in years. I remembered it from an org chart. Daniel had handled it before moving to the corporate office. The next morning, I drove 2 hours to the dusty warehouse labeled Northern Logistics Holdings. I wasn't sure what I'd find, if anything. But the moment the operations manager handed me a locked cabinet labeled Private DR, he knew. Inside were dozens of documents Daniel had hidden. Files that included executive correspondence, family records, financial reports, and one notarized letter addressed to me. "Julia, if you're reading this, I've failed to protect you from my family. I was going to confront them myself, but if I'm gone, you'll have to do it. The trust is real. The clause is enforceable. And Margot, she's not just mismanaging funds. She's covering something up. Start with the shipment records from June 14, 2019. Love. Daniel. I sat on the floor and cried. He had known. All along. He tried to protect me. And now it was my turn to finish what he started. I barely slept that night. I kept rereading Daniel's letter, my fingers tracing the edges as though touching it could bring him back. Start with the shipment records from June 14, 2019. The date rang no bells. It was 2 months before I gave birth to Leo, during a time I was mostly on bed rest and completely out of the company's loop. I scanned the boxes from Northern's archive. There it was, Sage June 14, 19. Inside were standard manifests, supplier invoices, and a large printout of shipment tracking data routed through Rothwell's International Freight Division. First glance, nothing stood out. Until I saw a single delivery rerouted from Singapore through Dubai to Sao Paulo. No receiving entity. No destination address. The payment for that leg of the journey came from a Rothwell corporate card. Signed off by Margot Roth. Kept digging. That specific cargo container. It never showed up on Rothwell's inbound logs, which meant either it was misfiled or it never came back. Then I saw it. An attached customs report flagged with a confidential note. The cargo had been seized and sealed by Brazilian authorities under suspicion of containing illicit medical samples, potentially biological. I sat back stunned. Rothwell wasn't in the biotech business. At least not officially. I called Martin. He arrived within hours, and together we cross-referenced Daniel's notes. What emerged was horrifying. Back in 2019, Margot had authorized a quiet partnership with a shadowy lab operating under a Rothwell shell corporation. The goal: high-risk pharmaceutical trials on underregulated compounds, without official FDA clearance. And it had backfired. The Brazilian government had intercepted the shipment. Daniel had found out months later, and had started distancing himself from the company's decisions. That's why he moved his shares into the trust. That's why he hid the documents. He'd been planning to expose her, but he died before he could. Now I had everything. The court date for the custody petition arrived faster than I expected. Margot entered with confidence, her lawyer smug and condescending. They presented concerns about my emotional stability, my work schedule, my supposed neglect of Leo's needs. Then it was my turn. I calmly produced letters from Leo's teachers, pediatrician, and therapist, all praising his progress and our bond. I presented time logs, videos, and even testimonies from my nanny and close neighbors. But the real shift came when Martin stood and handed the judge a sealed packet. "Your Honor," he said, "this contains evidence of financial and ethical misconduct by the petitioner Margot Roth, including illegal operations and a potential cover-up related to Rothwell Industries. We're requesting a criminal investigation be opened, and a cease and desist order preventing further contact between Ms. Roth and the child until the matter is resolved." Margot's face drained of color. Her lawyer tried to object, but the judge ordered an immediate recess and private review of the materials. It didn't take long. When the judge returned, her tone had changed completely. "In light of the documents presented," she said, "this court finds no evidence to support the petitioner's claim. In fact, the court now has serious concerns about the petitioner's judgment and motives. Temporary sole custody is granted to the mother, Julia Martinez, effective immediately. All visitation privileges for the petitioner are hereby suspended pending further investigation." I couldn't breathe. I reached for Leo's hand and held it so tight, tears slipping down my face. Margot was escorted out of the courtroom before she could say a word. But I wasn't done yet. The company meeting was just days later. The annual executive summit, one that Margot had always headlined with flair and spectacle. But this year it was different. She wasn't in the building. Instead, she was under formal investigation, her assets frozen, her phone silent. I stood at the head of the boardroom, the same spot she once stood to cast me aside. I wore white that day, not to mock her, but to mark a new beginning. I tapped the microphone. "Good morning. Before we begin this year's performance review, I have a story to share. Heads turned. The room grew quiet. I told them everything. The secret shipment. The ghost subsidiary. The consequences Daniel tried to prevent. I laid out the documentation piece by piece, showing them how close Rothwell had come to a full-scale corporate collapse because of one woman's pride. And then I said, Rothwell Industries belongs to the future, to integrity, to responsibility. And today, that future starts with a clean slate. Applause erupted, not out of politeness but relief. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were rebuilding. Weeks later, as the press headlines burned with words like corporate fraud, Rothwell heiress under fire, and widow CEO cleans house, I sat on my balcony with Leo in my lap, reading him his favorite bedtime story. He looked up and asked, "Mommy, are you a boss now?" Smiled. "I guess I am. But you don't yell like a boss," he said. I laughed. "That's because real bosses don't need to yell. They lead." Took months to settle everything. Rothwell's board was reshaped. I hired new executives, restructured departments, and launched Daniel's vision for the company. A tech-forward expansion that would finally bring it into the 21st century. As for Margot, she never saw prison, but she lost everything. Her title, her voting power, her influence. Last I heard, she was living in a quiet condo out of state. She sent Leo a birthday card. I never opened it. Some people might think I got revenge. But that's not how I see it. I didn't destroy her. I just refused to let her destroy me. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.